Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are looking at, well, a really massive shift in how queer media is being consumed globally. Specifically, the huge international expansion of the boys' love genre, or BL. And this is being driven almost entirely, it seems, by the money and the sheer logistical power of big global streaming platforms, thinking Netflix, Viki, and even the specialist ones like GagaOOLala.
And that shift, yeah, it's absolutely undeniable. But it's the consequences of that shift that I think really demand we take a closer look. We've definitely hit a point of, well, intellectual friction, you could say, about where this genre is actually heading.
Exactly. Which brings us to our central question, the disagreement we want to unpack today. Are these streaming platforms ultimately saving BL, or are they diluting it? Is this huge global exposure, with all its promises of financial backing and, creative improvement, is it actually compromising the genre's essential local authenticity, its cultural depth?
Right. And my position essentially is that this push, this imperative almost for massive global reach, inherently waters down the genre's cultural specificity. It compromises artistic integrity because when creators feel pressured or even forced to adjust their original vision for, well, mass consumption, something vital gets lost. The core of the art form, I think.
And my argument, conversely, is that these platforms are absolutely essential catalysts. They provide the financial boost, the resources, the global appreciation needed to lift BL out of being just a niche regional thing, to let it evolve into, frankly, a sustainable and high-quality creative industry.
Okay, so let's dig into that financial uplift then. How does that actually work on the ground?
Well, these platforms have just fundamentally changed the scale of BL production. It used to be often, a pretty quickly made low-budget genre for a specific audience. Now, it attracts serious investment, and that changes everything. Think about a series like I Told Sunset About You, just incredibly intense, high-production drama. Its international release on GagaOOLala, that ensured the quality, the visibility. It actually matched the artistic ambition behind it. Or look at how Thai BL series have just exploded globally, now reaching millions on Netflix, in Europe, the Americas, places they never would have reached before.
I absolutely acknowledge the visibility argument. Of course, but we have to interrogate the trade-off, don't we? This global reach, I believe, comes at a significant cost to the genre's deep local cultural roots, the subtleties. BL isn't just one thing, right? It's so deeply embedded in diverse cultural contexts.
That global funding is the thing that lets creators really flourish. It dramatically boosts production values. We're seeing much better cinematography, access to more complex scripts, and crucially, it helps the production houses take bigger financial risks on more ambitious stories. Without that global investment, let's be honest, a lot of the stories that push boundaries, they just wouldn't get made. Or if they did, they'd look technically, well, substandard. Look at KinnPorsche, the series. It got vital international backing that let it pull off those action sequences, the intricate sets, things that would be almost impossible to fund just from the regional market. That lets the genre grow beyond, simple romance tropes.
I hear you on the economics, I really do. But I still contend that global investment often demands a kind of cultural sterilization. The very distinct flavors of BL from different regions are being smoothed out, homogenized. Just think about the difference in cultural expression. Japanese BL, for instance, often relies on incredibly subtle, ambiguous emotional cues, right? It values that slow burn where feelings are implied, not always spelled out. But then you look at Thai BLs, and they frequently weave in quite specific social or educational commentary, sometimes challenging norms through metaphor.
And that depth is valuable, absolutely. But if the show itself is inaccessible or looks cheap because it's underfunded, does that specificity even reach the audience? Or does the poor quality actually undermine the message?
My point is that the consequence of optimizing these very different narrative styles for a global audience, aiming for that sort of lowest common denominator appeal, is that these crucial cultural nuances get lost, or they get drastically simplified. That slow, subtle Japanese approach you mentioned, it often just doesn't perform well with algorithms that reward, immediate emotional highs and lows. So what happens? You get simplified emotional arcs, or the outright removal of specific social commentary that was actually central to the original cultural critique. If the heart of the story, its unique cultural DNA, is carved out or sanitized just to make it palatable for mass appeal, well then the global exposure is just celebrating a diluted copy, isn't it?
Okay, I absolutely concede that the integrity of the original story is paramount, non-negotiable. But let's talk about the practical side of this supposed dilution. You're focusing heavily on the artistic loss, whereas I'm seeing creative empowerment. Yes, okay, sometimes there might be distribution edits, maybe minor technical things, but surely those are outweighed by the huge benefits of better production quality, global exposure, brings higher quality cinematography, better sets, the ability for the production itself to be more daring in scope. Think complex period settings, expensive special effects, things that were unthinkable before.
I really have to push back on calling them minor edits. That phrasing feels misleading. Because these cuts often functionally change the story's meaning, its intent. When international versions are released, key scenes showing sensitive relationship dynamics, or even just overt expressions of queer identity, are frequently cut, or they're toned down significantly. And let's be clear, this is done specifically to comply with varying global rating systems or to avoid regulatory headaches in certain countries.
Yet look at the tangible benefits of platform investment. Netflix putting money into shows like Red Balloon or GagaOOLala consistently funding emerging, maybe less mainstream Thai and Taiwanese BLs. That demonstrably empowers creators. These platforms give ambitious showrunners the chance to realize complex visions that were simply impossible before because of budget constraints. That's a creative freedom that pure domestic funding often just can't provide.
But it's a freedom with strings attached, isn't it? When creators are removing essential emotional tension or sanitizing physical intimacy or deleting commentary that the original writers intended, that's a profound artistic compromise. It's not just a technical adjustment. And beyond that, the real danger, I think, is the psychological effect. It's when creators start to self-censor before they even write. They preemptively change scripts, tone down the queerness, dilute the social critique, just to make sure they get that global platform deal, to get access to those distribution dollars.
But isn't a widely seen, maybe slightly adjusted story better than a perfect one that languishes in obscurity? The genre can't just survive on artistic purity alone. It needs a sustainable economic engine.
It needs sustainable economics that don't gut the genre of its purpose. When this self-censorship becomes the norm, it shrinks the space for genuine challenging queer narratives. It risks confining the genre mostly to palatable, easily digestible romance, instead of allowing it to be a space for meaningful social reflection. A BL should reflect its creator's vision, its cultural context, not just the lowest common denominator acceptable for global distribution.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to accessibility and, well, fan behavior. Because this is an area where I think globalization offers an almost unambiguous good. Without these platforms, BL would just remain locked away, virtually inaccessible to most of its huge global fan base. And that lack of access, it forces international fans towards illegal means, pirated versions, dodgy fan translations, which gives zero money back to the creators and, frankly, zero useful feedback either.
Accessibility is absolutely critical, I agree, but we have to look very carefully at how these platforms might be dictating content through their algorithms.
But streaming platforms solve that piracy issue. They provide illegal, high-quality, properly subtitled content almost instantly. And crucially, they offer valuable data metrics. They show exactly which international demographics are watching what, engaging with specific storylines. This data lets creators and studios understand audience preferences beyond just, repeating the same old tropes. This feedback can actually inspire genuinely original content aimed at specific global niches, helping to break the stagnation you sometimes see in purely regional markets. Look, global distribution can coexist with creative integrity. Platforms just need to choose to respect the artistic vision. Look at Semantic from Korea. Phenomenal success worldwide, huge fan base, but it kept its sharp, focused story and unique aesthetic completely intact.
Semantic error. Yes, it's often held up as the example, but maybe it's the exception that proves the rule. I'm just not convinced that metrics and algorithms are truly serving artistic integrity across the board. Far too often, platforms seem to prioritize what's algorithm-friendly content that maximizes engagement metrics, watch time, clicks, over genuine artistic vision. And this prioritization means that, yes, easily digestible tropes, maybe excessive fan service, or simplistic stereotypes get amplified because they guarantee those high click-through rates, high completion rates.
But surely high engagement just means the audience likes it. Isn't that just supply meeting demand on a global scale?
The dilution happens, I think, through the emphasis on immediate gratification. The algorithms tend to favor stories that rush intimacy, perhaps, or rely heavily on those fan service moments, maybe gratuitous kissing scenes or overly stylized interactions that act as a substitute for deeper emotional development. And this focus inevitably pushes local stories to shed their narrative depth when they're optimized purely for clicks and subscriptions. BL gained its power precisely because it often had the courage to tackle difficult, sensitive topics that mainstream media shied away from. That essential bravery, that shouldn't be traded away just for more subscribers.
But I'd argue the expansion of resources allows for more diverse narratives, not fewer. More production companies can now afford to take chances, precisely because the platforms have gathered a large enough audience to make even niche content financially viable. The sheer volume of BL being produced now, I think, counteracts the risk of total homogenization.
But if the algorithm effectively mandates only the safest, most repeatable stories, if content is only deemed viable when it's stripped of its specificity, then what we gain in sheer numbers of viewers, we irrevocably lose in actual creative value, in cultural resonance. Growth shouldn't have to mean diluting the genre's soul.
I think we've definitely hit the core tension here, haven't we? It's about the sustainability and the identity of this art form. So to summarize my position, I see global streaming platforms as necessary catalysts. They provide financial stability, better production resources, and much broader cultural appreciation. Yes, there are imperfections, distribution pressures, I acknowledge that, but the benefits, more resources leading to more ambitious, higher quality shows and reaching a vastly larger global audience, these, I believe, outweigh the risks. They prevent the genre from being stuck in small, under-resourced regional pockets.
And I maintain that exposure, however wide, is only truly successful if the story keeps its identity intact. BL draws its strength from authenticity, from cultural specificity, and often from bold storytelling that challenges norms. If platforms essentially require creators to sanitize or dilute that content to get global reach, then the genre risks losing its creative essence, its cultural integrity. Real global success for me requires that these stories remain rigorously true to themselves, resisting that algorithmic pressure.
This conversation really does underscore that deep, complex tension you find whenever any creative medium with cultural weight goes global. It's an ongoing balancing act, isn't it, between market expansion and preserving that core identity.
It absolutely is. And the future path of the BL genre really hinges on which side of that very delicate scale ends up carrying more weight. There's certainly a lot more to unpack here.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. See you in the next one.